Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are strapping in for a fascinating journey that, well, it crosses millennia from ancient magical scriptures all the way to the bleeding edge of artificial intelligence.
We are. And our subject is one of the most powerful and certainly one of the most controversial spiritual artifacts in the modern Buddhist world.
We're doing an intensive deep dive into the history, the sacred alchemy, and all the fierce authentication battles around the legendary Khun Phaen amulet.
A creation of the very highly revered Loam Putimizriko of Wat Lahan Rai in Rayong Province, Thailand.
And we're being really specific today. We're zeroing in on the 2515 BE edition. We want to pin down the origins of that sacred powder, the Muan Sarn, and understand the intense conflict that's thrown the entire market into chaos.
Right, the whole 2515 versus 2517 debate.
Exactly. Our mission today is to figure out how an amulet so steeped in spiritual tradition now requires cutting-edge, deep learning tech just to prove what it is.
Well, to even begin to appreciate the scope of this controversy, you first have to understand the sheer magnitude of Long Putim's historical and spiritual stature.
He wasn't just some respected monk.
Oh, not at all. His devotees credited him with this unmatched combination of righteous conduct, profound compassion, and truly powerful supernatural abilities.
And it's those abilities that really elevate the value of everything he ever touched,
Yeah.
right? The stories about his powers are foundational to why this amulet is so important.
They are. And we're talking about verifiable multi-witness phenomena that, just defy any kind of rational explanation.
Like what are some of the big ones?
Well, the most persistent stories are about bilocation.
Being in two places at once.
Exactly. Devotees would regularly report seeing him out on his alms rounds in the markets of Seanbury, which is a significant distance from his temple, Wat Lahan Rai. But at the very same time, he was documented as being seated and receiving visitors back at the temple. And this wasn't like a one-off story. It was a repeated observation. It really cemented this idea that he could manifest his form elsewhere.
That speaks to a complete mastery over physical reality. But the most powerful stories I've read seem to happen during the consecration rituals themselves.
Absolutely. The sources detail this one specific ceremony. It was in 2511 BE, where Luang Putim was blessing holy water in a large ceremonial urn.
And people were there watching this.
Yes, other senior monks, a couple committee members, and they all vividly described the water just beginning to boil. Not gently, but vigorously.
With no heat source.
None. And then it started to rise, visibly inside the urn, as if some immense non-physical force was acting on it. And everyone attributed that entirely to his supernatural command.
Wow. And then there's the one that really gets me, the one that shows his control over the amulets themselves, the taproot.
Ah, yes, the taproot. So these are small, sacred metal scroll amulets. He had this ability to consecrate them while he was submerged underwater.
Okay, that's impressive enough.
But then, when these consecrated scrolls were placed in a bowl of water, witnesses confirmed they didn't just sink, they floated up against gravity.
And then
They began to circle the bowl completely on their own, guided by the power he had instilled in them. I mean, this isn't just reverence. This is documented awe at his spiritual prowess.
So his established power is the reason this Khun Phaen amulet, which contains some, really specialized and volatile ingredients, is considered his masterpiece.
It's his magnum opus, you could say. But that power is also what drives the intense multi-million baht debate we need to get into right now. The 2515 versus 2517 creation date.
This is not just some academic squabble over a couple of years. The financial and historical stakes are so enormous that the conflict literally forced the entire system to just pause.
That's right. The fallout was critical. The president of the Thai Amulet Association, which is a very prestigious body, found the conflict so intractable.
So messy.
And the competing claims so confusingly persuasive that he made this unprecedented move. He temporarily halted all official competition judging for this specific Khun Phaen model.
He just took it off the table completely.
Completely.
Yep.
Until the historical facts could be conclusively settled, the major market refused to officially certify either version. And that just plunged collectors and dealers into a state of intense uncertainty.
It's a huge crisis rooted in history, local knowledge, and, let's be honest, vast sums of money. So to understand the claims, we have to go back to the beginning, the spiritual beginning, the origin of that unique sacred powder. the Moonsarn.
Let's unpack the timing. The sources are very clear on this. They place the genesis of this highly potent Khun Phaen edition in mid-2515 BE. That's 1972.
And this wasn't just Long Putim making some amulets for his followers. It had a specific institutional purpose, right?
Absolutely. The creation was formally initiated by the Wat Lahan Rai Committee. A man named Mr. Sai Kaius Soing was a leading figure.
And the goal?
The intent was highly merit-based. They wanted to create significant merits and provide tangible rewards for donors who were funding the temple's incredibly important Phuk Phathasima ceremony.
Okay, let's break that down for people. A Phuk Phathasima ceremony, that's a big deal. It's not a trivial thing.
Not at all. It's the process of marking the sacred boundary stones of the Ubos, the temple's main chapel or ordination hall. It formally consecrates it as a space where high religious acts can happen.
So it's a massive undertaking and needs a lot of funding and a lot of spiritual gravity.
Precisely. It's a landmark event in a temple's history. And to fund a project like that, you need to offer commensurate merit objects. But the real uniqueness of this 2FI15 edition lies in its core component, the fried cumin powder.
And this recipe wasn't something he just, found in a modern book. Where did he get the instructions for this very specialized ingredient?
This is where the ancient lineage comes in. Luang Kutim discovered the specialized technique in an old scripture, a very old text.
And the scripture belonged to his great-grandfather, Luang Kusang Tao.
That's right. And Luang Kusang Tao holds this incredibly honored place in the temple's history. He was the very first abbot of Wat Lahan Rai. And he himself was renowned for potent magical power that was passed down this lineage.
We're talking about a whole other level of power, aren't we? Even beyond what people saw from Luang Kutim.
The legends are formidable. They claim that if Luang Kusang Tao just spat on the ground, the very earth would visibly crack beneath the force of his spiritual energy.
Wow. So that's the authority behind the recipe Luang Putim uncovered.
Exactly. And Luang Putim, recognizing the immense power detailed in these ancient texts, he decided this ingredient was necessary. He reasoned that adding fried cumin maha food powder would significantly boost the sacred power of the amulet.
The idea was to actually embed the spirit's ability to help and grant blessings right into the matrix of the powder.
It's a form of spiritual engineering. It's intended to create a powerful guardian and a boon-granting ally for the person who wears it.
But this ambition required getting what is arguably the most difficult, the most sensitive, and the most dangerous ingredient in all of Thai spiritual alchemy.
It did. And this leads us to the critical task, retrieving a human skull under very specific tragic circumstances.
The core ingredient demanded by that ancient scripture
was the skull of a woman who died while she was pregnant. In Thai, it's known as a Ying Tai Thong clone.
And that kind of spiritual entity is considered immensely powerful, right? Often volatile.
Extremely potent. It holds a unique connection to the cycle of life and death, which makes its spiritual essence perfect for this kind of consecration.
So who takes on a mission like that? That's not a job for just anyone.
No. This responsibility fell to a man named Mor Kulap Joy Karom. He was a local master of magic spells, incantations, a real expert in traditional spiritual practice, and he volunteered for this perilous task.
To retrieve the skull from a specific grave in the Wat Lahan Rai graveyard. That sounds fraught with spiritual danger. I mean, you're not just dealing with physical remains, are you? You're interacting with the entire spiritual hierarchy of the cemetery.
Exactly. The sources are very clear about the difficulties Mor Kulap faced. He had to navigate a confrontation with the cemetery guardian, the Nai Pa Cha, and then the highly potent mother spirit, the Mo Nang Fry, and of course the Fry Kuman spirit itself, the spirit of the unborn child.
So how do you even begin to negotiate with three such formidable entities for, well, the core of their being? Did he use force, or was this more of a diplomatic mission?
It was entirely a negotiation based on pure virtue, not force. The sources are clear on this. The spirits only consented and willingly participated because of the overwhelming purity of the motive.
Not for personal gain?
No, but for creating merit for the benefit of Buddhism. And also because of the towering, almost irresistible merit and virtue of Luang Putim himself. The spirits agreed to have their essence incorporated for the higher purpose of funding that Phuk Phathasima ceremony.
That just underscores the profound respect required for this kind of alchemy.
Absolutely.
So once this powerful raw material was respectfully acquired, the meticulous process of turning it into the pure, usable sacred powder, the Muon Sarn, could begin. We're moving from dangerous retrieval to controlled alchemy.
It was a multi-staged and lengthy process. It really shows the profound effort Luang Pu Tim invested. The very first step was just stabilizing the component.
What does that mean?
The skull was carefully wrapped in cloth and then placed in the most spiritually protected location in the entire temple, behind the main Buddha image inside the old Upasat.
The temple chapel. How long did it stay there?
For a significant period between 3 and 4 months. This was necessary for 2 reasons: spiritual assimilation and physical preparation. It had to become completely dry and, crucially, completely odorless.
Which would signify its transformation from, physical remains to a spiritually charged neutral substance.
Exactly. Once it was stabilized, it was then physically rendered down, pounded finely, and combined with a precise mixture of other sacred components.
This included other powders Luang Pu Tim had prepared himself.
Yes, powders he provided personally, along with powder derived from 108 different kinds of sacred herbs, known as wan.
That number, 108, it's so significant in Buddhism. It represents perfection, totality. This wasn't just some random mix of herbs.
Not at all. It represents a kind of holistic sacred power. And the next critical step was the binder. The dry mixture needed to be unified. For this, they used a highly consecrated liquid.
Which was?
Water that had been soaked with the pollen and stamen of 5 different types of lotuses. It's called Namchai Kisorn Buatine 5.
Using lotus pollen water, which is the ultimate symbol of purity and transcendence in Buddhism, as the binding agent just reinforces the sacred intent of the whole thing.
Precisely. This wet mixture was then formed into large, manageable rods, sort of like chalk sticks, and left out to be completely sun-dried. This created the consecrated medium for the final, most powerful step.
And that last step sounds less like mixing and more like, writing sacred energy itself.
It was. Luang Pu Tim set an auspicious time, determined by astrology and spiritual signs. The dried Muan Sarn rods were then used to write sacred Akara Khmer, or Pali yantras, directly onto a slate board.
So the essence of the rod was transferred into the writing, and then they harvested the writing itself? That's incredible, like scraping off sacred wisdom written in the powder, making it even purer.
That is the alchemy. The writing was meticulously erased and scraped off the board to gather the finished, ultra-pure Fry Kuman Mahafut powder.
And this finished powder was then the focus of the main consecration ceremony.
A very powerful gathering. It took place in the old chapel, with 9 monks chanting, and Luang Pu Tim presiding as the chief monk, channeling all the collective merit and energy into this newly created material.
And after that, it wasn't just mixed into a big batch of clay, it was stored until the moment of pressing, right?
Correct. This incredibly potent finished powder was taken and securely stored in Luang Pu Tim's personal quarters, his kuti, awaiting the moment it would be mixed into the final material and pressed into the Khun Phaen form.
And it's so crucial here to contrast this unique 2515 process with earlier models. The distinctiveness of these ingredients is key to the authentication problems that come later.
It really is. If you look at earlier Khun Phaen versions models, the local villagers recognized from, say, 2503 up to 2515, before this highly specialized batch, the composition was very different.
What were they made of?
The main components were often cooked, sticky rice, kao niao suk, which was a binder, mixed with various sacred wan herbs.
And the items embedded inside them seem much more physical, almost like talismans for protection rather than purely spiritual.
They were certainly more earthbound. They often had a gold powder or mica coating, but the embedded items were things like small taproot scrolls, different coins, even materials like tapu took fa long a nail from a coffin lid.
For protection against spirits.
Exactly. And even pieces of electrical wire, sci-fi. The 2515 batch represents a deliberate spiritual escalation by Luang Pu Tim. He was prioritizing the potent Fry Kuman essence over these more physical, generalized talismans.
Which makes the 2515 edition a totally distinct entity. The sources also mention some aesthetic differences in the final pressed amulets from that 2515 era.
Even within that one batch, there were variations. It depended on the mix ratio and the mold, the PIM that was used.
Yeah.
The source notes specific descriptions like the wan dak thong or golden herb texture with 2 takroots embedded.
And there are others.
Yes, there's also mention of specific molds like the wat block, yellow texture, no taproot embedded. These minute differences in color, texture, and whether there are embedded items or not, these are exactly what will later fuel the authentication conflict.
And it is the fragility and variance of this meticulously consecrated powder that brings us crashing right into the brutal reality of the modern market.
The transition from the sacred space of the Uposite to the high-stakes, ruthless world of the amulet market is jarring. We established that the 2515 versus 2517 debate caused a massive schism.
Let's call it what it is. The Great Divide. Collectors are firmly entrenched in Group 2515 or Group 2517. And this isn't just a friendly disagreement, it's constant public conflict over authenticity and market value.
And the core of the argument for the 2515 date rests with the most reliable historical witness, the local community. The Bonkai villagers who lived near the temple and were the primary users of these amulets from the very beginning. They are adamant.
What's their main point against the later 2517 date?
They emphatically assert that the Khun Phaen was not created in 2517. Their argument is rooted in direct, continuous experience. They say the older generation in the village only ever had models that dated from 2503 up to 2515.
And their reasoning is that the creation was for continuous fundraising for the temple construction.
Exactly, implying continuous consecration batches up to 2515 to fund that big Fakatasima ceremony.
So local tradition holds that this special period of creation ended with the great Fry Kuman batch in 15. But this local knowledge is directly undermined by the pricing structure enforced by the major market.
And that is the engine of the entire conflict. The sources detail an astronomical financial gap. The 2515 amulets, the ones favored by the locals, sell for thousands, maybe tens of thousands of baht. Valuable for sure, but accessible.
Okay, now compare that to the models recognized by the major market, the high-end dealers, the national associations, the ones you see in glass cases in Bangkok's big amulet malls.
Those models, often associated with the 2517 designation by the mainstream, sell for hundreds of thousands. Or, in perfect condition, even millions of baht.
That disparity is life-changing. If you own an authentic Khun Phaen, the difference between it being a 15 or a 17 can be the difference between paying your rent and buying a house.
That kind of financial pressure turns historical ambiguity into a brutal courtroom battle. The mainstream market is heavily invested in the 2517 recognition, which means the local historical truth that production ended in 2515 is effectively being marginalized by vast financial incentives.
And this pressure just makes the inherent difficulty in authentication even worse. Let's talk about that. Why is this particular powder amulet, this Phra Phang, so notoriously difficult to authenticate, even for experts?
Well, the challenge starts with the material itself. Phra Phang are inherently fragile. They are prone to natural damage, surface cracks, erosion. After 50 years of being handled and worn, an expert might be looking for a pristine line or a texture that has just been completely worn away by time.
And the photography used for authentication must just complicate things even more.
Massively. Poor or inconsistent lighting in photos can easily hide or misrepresent the subtle textural details that are crucial. What looks like a deep crack in one photo might just be a shadow in another. That leads to an immediate conflict in expert opinion.
So the human expert is struggling because they're examining an inherently unstable, inconsistent medium.
Correct. Authentication requires deep, specialized, often proprietary knowledge of the minute mold details and the natural texture variations specific to each production block, or PIM.
You mentioned PIM earlier. Can you define that a bit more clearly for us?
So PIM essentially means the specific mold or sub-addition. Because these were pressed by hand or with simple machines, the molds wore down over time, or multiple slightly different molds were used at the same time.
And the differences are tiny.
Microscopic. The tiny differences in the shape of the Buddha's face, the line of an arm, the number of tears in the base. That's what defines the PIM.
And telling a genuine PIM from a fake key becomes almost impossible when the material is degraded.
Precisely. Sophisticated fakes, key items, are designed to perfectly replicate the surface features. If a real one is worn down, it starts to look suspiciously similar to a high-quality fake. The human eye simply cannot consistently differentiate them. The financial reward for producing flawless fakes is just too high.
So this inherent complexity and the need for some kind of objective clarity is what pushed the authentication world away from conflicting human experts and into the realm of technology. The problem became too big for human judgment alone.
This is where the story shifts dramatically. We move from ancient alchemy to modern data science. The issue of authentication got so serious that academics have stepped in, using technology, specifically deep convolutional neural networks, or CNNs, to classify and authenticate these amulets.
The introduction of AI it's a stark validation of just how severe the counterfeit and classification crisis is. We're effectively trusting machines to settle historical and financial disputes that humans couldn't.
We are. The research we're looking at was designed to achieve ultra-high accuracy, moving beyond subjective human expertise. And they developed a successful two-step model.
Okay, walk us through that. What was the goal of the first step?
The first step was general classification. They trained a deep CNN model to just identify the main type of amulet. Is it a Khun Phaen? Is it a Frey Samdej? A broad, high-level task.
And how'd it do?
It was strong. This first step achieved an overall accuracy of about 95.63% in identifying the correct main amulet type. So that creates a solid foundation. The system knows what it's looking at.
But, as we've been saying, the real problem isn't identifying a Khun Phaen in general. It's telling the sub-editions, the PIMs, apart. Differentiating a real 2515 from a fake 2517. That has to be step 2.
That's the crucial second step. And it requires moving away from that generalized CNN. Once the main amulet type was identified, the system employed entirely separate, customized CNN models built specifically for that particular type. A model optimized only for Khun Phaen, for example.
And the results of that customized second step, especially for these challenging powder amulets, were pretty remarkable.
They were. The customized models achieved results of up to 98% accuracy when classifying these specific powder amulet sub-editions. This level of precision is what validates the whole approach. It moves classification from subjective opinion into the realm of quantitative data.
This high accuracy really underscores the challenges we've been talking about. Why are Frafong powder amulets fundamentally harder for an AI to process than, say, a metal coin amulet with clear edges?
There are 3 core reasons, all tied to their age and composition. First, the training data itself is noisy. The images fed to the AI are often of objects that are heavily worn, incomplete, or damaged. Generalized CNNs, like the ones used for facial recognition, they struggle when the input images show so much variance from physical decay.
Okay, and the second point is about image quality and texture.
Yes. Powder amulets are inherently textural. Their surface is porous and uneven, and the lighting used in photos dramatically changes how that texture is perceived. A generalized CNN might interpret a slight shadow as a flaw or a specific feature when it's just bad photography. The customized models learn to ignore that variance and focus on the inherent microgeometry of the mold.
And the third factor is that the designs themselves are just so similar.
Precisely. You look at many high-end powder amulets like Frost Samdeg or these Khun Phaen sub-editions, and they look superficially the same. A seated Buddha, a rectangular shape. The differences are microscopic. The specific number of tears in the base, the curve of a hand, the shape of the flame motif above the head.
These are features that require deep feature extraction, focusing on micro details, not macro shapes.
Right, and this explains why generalized, pre-trained models like VGG16 or ResNet, which are fantastic for recognizing cats and cars, they just fall short here. They weren't trained to analyze the fine texture of 50-year-old dried herbal powder.
So the custom model had to be trained to see things a normal image classifier wouldn't.
Exactly. The academic study explicitly noted their custom CNN performed significantly better. A model trained on millions of common images doesn't know what to prioritize when looking at the subtle difference between 2 powder pressings that are off by a millimeter.
So the custom CNN was trained to prioritize features like microcracks, surface porosity, and the exact geometry of the mold indentation rather than just the big shapes.
It was trained to see the evidence of the PIM block itself. And by focusing on these characteristics, the AI moves the authentication debate out of the hands of conflicting, financially pressured human opinions and into the objective realm of data science.
Achieving a reliability rate that is absolutely essential given the financial gap between the 2515 and 2517 market prices.
It's a striking contrast, isn't it? An amulet based on sacred materials retrieved from a graveyard by a master of ancient spells, now requiring advanced neural networks to confirm its validity.
So this deep dive has spanned the whole spectrum from belief to science. It's tied together 19th century scriptures, 20th century alchemy, a huge market conflict, and 21st century deep learning. Let's quickly recap the core things you need to take away. We confirmed the original intent for this powerful edition, mid-2515 BE, for the merit of the Phuk Fathassama ceremony, leveraging the lineage texts of Long Pu Sung Tao.
And we detailed that rigorous, multi-stage alchemy of the Muon Sarn. The dangerous retrieval of the Ingtai Thong Klum skull by Morkalap, the stabilization behind the Buddha image, the mixture with 108 Muon herbs binding with lotus pollen water, and that final spiritual transfer through writing on the slate.
And we clarified the central puzzle, the intense controversy that split collectors into the 2515 group, supported by local history and lower prices, and the 2517 group, supported by the high-stakes market. A conflict so severe it temporarily shut down official judging competitions.
And crucially, we analyzed why this specific problem necessitated the evolution of authentication. The fragility and subtle differences in Phra molds are so complex that customized deep learning CNNs, achieving 98% accuracy, were required to reliably tell the sub-editions apart and fight sophisticated counterfeits.
Which brings us back to this duality in the amulet world. On one side, you have the intense multi-million bot financial drive, the need for AI to verify the physical form, the mold characteristics, the texture,
Yeah.
a drive rooted in materialism.
But on the other side, there's the core spiritual intent of the relic. The sources remind us that regardless of which PIM you wear, or which year you believe it was consecrated, the ultimate goal of the practice is to heed the Buddha's teachings.
To do good deeds and avoid sin, the amulet is a reminder and a spiritual aid, not the end goal itself. So, if an artifact requires deep learning artificial intelligence, using complex feature maps and customized architecture to confirm its material legitimacy and its financial value, what deeper wisdom and insight does it require for you, the devotee, to truly understand and embody the spiritual value that Longpu Tim originally sought to impart?
It really forces us to ask, are we collecting the artifact or are we collecting the teaching? At the end of the day, the greatest authentication should be found in one's own virtuous conduct.
An excellent thought to ponder, especially since the path to personal merit doesn't need to be run through a neural network.
Indeed.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the intersection of faith, history, and technology. We'll see you next time.